Welcome to Ministry Mondays with Meg. I'm Meg. Welcome to the show, everyone. If this is your first time here, welcome. Also, where have you been? So we're glad to have you. Today, I have a new friend, and I know every time I say I'm so excited, but I am. Like, she might be like the most educated person I've ever had on my show, and I've had some incredibly smart people. But like, it'll all be in the show notes, all her bio and background and all that stuff. But like, actually read it if you don't, because like, prove me wrong. She's pretty brilliant. So I have with us today Reverend Anna Gheen. Anna, thank you so much for joining the madness. Meg and her ADD a little bit. And welcome. I'm so glad to have you. And would you tell everybody a little bit about who you are, what you do, and we'll just kind of go from there.
Well, Wado, that's thank you in the Cherokee language, the language of my ancestors.
Wado?
Wado.
Okay.
So,
look at that.
CO would be hello, and Wado would be thank you. So I'm Cherokee, and I am part of 0.1% of U.S. pastors who are of Native American background. Being of Indigenous background is not common, largely because of the legacy of the boarding schools and the damage that those have done to Indigenous peoples, not just here in the U.S., but in Canada and even in other places throughout the world. But for me, I found some really interesting connections between my faith and my Cherokee ancestry and the old ways, as the elders refer to them. So that's kind of where my heart ends up beating.
Yeah. And you are pastoring your PCUSA, right?
Yes. Okay. I'm a pastor of Westminster Presbyterian Church here in Richmond, Virginia. One of the most unusual congregations I've ever encountered. In fact, during the interview process, one of the things that came out was that they were really used to having a pastor who got into trouble. And after having seen some of the trouble I managed to get into in my last congregation, they said, "We think you might be a good fit for us." Their last pastor had ended up in some conflicts. We house a school for immigrant and refugee children, and there were some lawsuits filed over that. We host a lot of Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous groups, and the church policy is to allow smoking on our property because, as the previous pastor said a few months ago, these people had major addictions. If smoking is what's helping them right now, we're not going to stop that. So there were some conflicts over that, and the church stood with the pastor and said, "This is a Jesus thing, and we're going to do the Jesus thing." So I mean, one of the most beautiful things we have right now with all of the chaos in our world is that I have a congregation that wants skin in the game. They don't just want to be issuing statements about what's going on. They want to know, how do we show up? What can we do to make a difference, to make this a safe place for members of our community, for people who feel on the margins? How do we set policies that protect people? And so I feel deeply honored to be in a position of leadership along with my elders.
Like what the church is supposed to be. That's awesome. Because I looked at your website and I actually wrote down, and I love it. To us, the most profound spiritual moments actually happen outside Sunday service. Our mission is simple: reaching out with Christ to an ever-changing world. And I'm like, well, because that's what the church is called to do. Oh my gosh.
Yes. So it's beautiful. I do spend time in the office each week, but the attitude is, "But Pastor, you're the face of the church. So, we want you out there connecting with different ministries, different activist groups. I got asked, it was funny when another question I got asked during the interview was, if you went to a protest and only 10 of our leaders showed up, would you be disappointed? And I'm like, I don't think I've ever been to a church where 10 people in leadership would have shown up for a protest before. I'd be ecstatic if 10 of you showed up. Because that would be not just the elders, that would be other leaders in the church. Because we only have 6 people on our elder board. We have a very streamlined governance process. So
I could do that. Like, yeah. Wow. So from what I understand from reading a little bit about you, is this a second career for you?
It is.
I was also a second career pastor. I was a nurse first. So, like, talk a little bit about that. How did you get to where you are?
So, I grew up in very fundamentalist churches. So, it was an interesting journey. I knew from the age of 6 I'd be a pastor if I could. I also knew that I was a woman, so I couldn't be. So I knew that in my heart I wanted to change the world in positive ways, and that's how I ended up getting initially involved in government. I served as a page in the State House of Representatives in Idaho, of all places. I did a couple terms in elected office. I worked as a staff assistant for a U.S. senator, and ultimately came to the conclusion that I couldn't make the impact I wanted to make from a political seat, that I needed to do it elsewhere. And it's really interesting as I've been thinking about that in the last few weeks, as I've had some opportunity to participate with some groups that are focused on social justice issues. What I realize is that what I wanted was not to actually be the politician. What I wanted was to be a lobbyist. And I didn't understand what lobbyists do. And so now I'm like, no, I want to be on the end that's saying, wait a minute, but we have a group of people with a problem, and I'd like to bring it to you and see if we can come up with a solution, not the end of having to sit in the chamber and vote on everything. But I did. I was engaged in government for a while. When I realized I couldn't do much with that, I started looking at other options. Ended up in business for a while. I was a corporate buyer for a number of years. Really enjoyed that particular job, but reached a point where I was like, this just really isn't interesting me anymore. And the recession hit Idaho several years later than it hit everything else.
Oh.
So day after Christmas, 2011, my employer said, we love you, but you don't have to finish your day at work. We're laying you off. And at that point, my family said, you spent your life talking about mission and ministry. Maybe this is God shoving you towards that. So I started looking at different mission organizations that I had encountered and put in some applications. And the first one to respond was Wycliffe Bible Translators. I ended up working with them for a number of years after that. But somewhere in the midst of all this, I got myself in... I got the opportunity to participate in a program for displaced workers to get a college degree. In Idaho at the time, 70% of jobs didn't pay a living wage. And so a lot of us just never bothered to go to college because we were never going to pay it off. I got into an associate's program in business and was doing very well in it and was bored to death. One day I was sitting reading my Bible and I was looking at the passage where Paul says the bishop must be the husband of one wife. And I went, wait a minute, hold the presses. Paul explicitly states he's single. So if this is about women aren't supposed to be pastors, then this also means single men aren't supposed to be pastors. And Paul has just disqualified himself from ministry. And I thought, I wonder if I've spent my whole life reading this incorrectly. So for the next few months, I did a lot of really deep digging about women and their leadership roles in Scripture, because I said, if I'm going to explain this to my very fundamentalist friends, I want to be able to do it from look, there's actually a scriptural case for this, not just a societal one. Finally came to the conclusion that, God sometimes does gift women with the intention that women have something to contribute as leaders in the church. And I said, well, God, if this is your will, if I have always wanted to be a pastor because I'm supposed to be a pastor, I want you to do 3 impossible things for me. I said, the first is I want my congregation to notice I have a call. The second is I want our executive presbyter, not my pastor, to notice I have a call. And the third is you've got to figure out a way to get me a Master of Divinity when I don't even have an associate's degree yet. Within a couple of weeks, our pastor announced he was going on a 6-month paid sabbatical. I intended to vote against it because the church was not doing very well. We were going to be left to rotating elders each week, and I've never seen that work. But the day of the vote, our clerk of session stood up and said, we've had a change. Our executive presbyter, in addition to his regular duties, has volunteered to be our full-time pastor for the next 6 months. And so everybody voted in favor. He was there for a couple of weeks, and we ended up sitting one afternoon after church talking about the work I was doing with Wycliffe Bible translators and the difference that Scripture makes in somebody's life when they actually understand what they're reading. And so I was telling him the more stories I'd tell him, the more excited he'd get. The more excited he'd get, the more stories I'd tell. And he finally says, have you ever preached a sermon on this? And I said, I've never preached a sermon in my life. He said, great, I'm going to be gone in 2 weeks. You're going to preach your first sermon. I went, okay. 2 weeks later, I stood up, gave a sermon on Bible translation, figured I'd get down. Everybody'd be like, so how can I support this? Instead, everybody who passed me asked the same question. They said, have you ever considered becoming a pastor? I thought, wow, that's actually a pretty interesting question to come up with out of that sermon. So Easter Sunday, I was the lay reader. The third time I cued everybody to join me, and they didn't. I realized I had something printed in my bulletin that was not what was printed in theirs, and went ahead with it. Service went off just fine. Afterwards, our executive presbyter was sitting in the library with me, and he was apologizing to me for that. And I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, that was like a -7. Stuff happens in worship. And it's good when stuff happens in worship because it gives us a chance to practice what we preach. We're always saying God accepts us as we are, but then, oops, we'll be struck by lightning if worship isn't perfect. And that's not the way it works. We were sitting there discussing, and one of the deacons walked past and said, you did such a beautiful job this morning. Have you ever considered becoming a pastor? I get very quiet. She walks out. He turns to me, says, I'd really like to know the answer because I think you have a call. And I'm like, okay, well, that's number 2. And so I confessed that I'd been praying about it. He gets very quiet, looks across the room, then turns to me and says, I think we can get you into Princeton on a full ride. There's a lot of story to follow that, but I graduated from Princeton 2020 with dual degrees, Master of the Arts in Education and a Master of Divinity, and went straight into being a pandemic pastor. So it's been nothing but chaos since I entered ministry.
Which ministry is just chaos as it is, though. But
yes,
beautiful, lovely chaos. Oh my gosh! I mean, tell God you need a thing, or 3 things.
That's it exactly. My grandmother used to say, if you're going to pray big.
Exactly.
And I figured by asking 3 impossible things, because there was no reason for any of those to happen anytime in the near future, those would be some pretty good signs that this really was God calling me. No, go ahead. To take a kid, my family on my dad's side were immigrants during the potato famine. So we're Scots-Irish. Most of his side of the family never even went to college. And then on my mother's side, we walked the Trail of Tears to the reservation in Oklahoma. And again, not a lot of opportunity for college or higher education. To take that person born in a state with very little opportunity and all of a sudden multiple advanced degrees from a respected seminary, there's no way to look at that and see anything but divine intervention in it.
Right. And what I was going to say was, like, I think, actually, I know how reading a passage correctly, understanding what it actually says, changes lives. So given your background, your history with Indigenous faith, and then here you are in this other career, but there's always been that calling there. But fundamentalist, because I grew up in the Baptist church where women didn't even take up offering. They could be deaconesses, but what that meant was your spouse was the deacon and you were cleaning up communion. And Women's Sunday was if there was a fifth Sunday of the month and at night. So
yeah,
so I get that, but going how much that opens your eyes and your heart and your mind and your all those things, because you have this new understanding. Like the first time I understood that Jesus and the woman at the well was not Jesus condemning her, was not Jesus going, oh, I know about all these. No, Jesus going, I know. Like, women sold the whole Levite marriage system thing. So instead of condemning, Jesus going, I see you.
Yeah. I know what you've been through and I understand it.
And how that completely changes her life. And so, yeah, I mean, people that do that are so needed. I'm just grateful for you in this ministry, and I, and we don't even really know each other that well yet. So, and now you've gone from becoming a pandemic pastor, and wow. I that's when I left. That's at the beginning. Like I started here at March 1st of 2020. So I wouldn't have survived, but that's another story for another time. So now you're in Ph.D. work.
Yes.
Okay, so tell me about, like, because that sounds incredibly interesting as well.
It is. So I'm with NAIITS, an Indigenous Learning Community. Back during the Red Power movement, there were some gentlemen who took part in the takeover of Alcatraz. One of them was a gentleman by the name of Richard Twiss. He had a good friend, Terry LeBlanc, and they and several others decided after their conversion to try to go to seminary together as Indigenous men and women. And Twiss and LeBlanc and others decided that what they really needed, because they really struggled with the colonialism that was really evident in Western education, and particularly in the educating of ministers. They decided they developed a vision for a school that was Indigenous run and Indigenous led and based on Indigenous ways of understanding the world. And so they incorporated NAIITS a number of years ago. And we are now, I think, a year and a half into being an accredited experimental PhD program with ATS. That's the same accrediting body that Princeton uses. So somebody issued a PhD through this program is as qualified for a professorship as somebody issued a PhD through any other respectable seminary. And the biggest difference is that we're doing PhD in community. If you've ever done doctoral research, you know that it tends to be very lonely. It's you working in your corner on your project, on your work that will be your possession. Yeah. But Indigenous communities don't see knowledge that way. We view knowledge as something to be corporately shared and developed. So the doctoral program is cohort-based, and there are a number of us working on different research projects, some of them ranging from strictly academic work on things like boarding schools or the Deloria family, to things that are less academic. One of my colleagues is doing he's going to essentially, his dissertation is a film, and it's on our relationship with the land. So we've got a lot of different creative ways of engaging advanced research. Mine is actually tied to pre-colonial ways in which my tribe, the Cherokee, Chaliki before the colonizers got a hold of the language. Incorporated people with disabilities and particularly with what we might identify today as mental health issues into the leadership of the tribe, and how that could actually create a model for incorporating people with mental health challenges into the leadership of the church today.
Do you want to say more about that? Because I'm the mom of my oldest is 26 and he has autism, and sure, when I was pastoring, he was there every Sunday, but how they include someone like that, well, that's a whole nother thing, because, well, most women who do have the opportunity to serve end up in small rural congregations, even though they're capable of doing so much more. However, that leads to small congregations with small budgets, and so things like that get passed over. So do you want to talk more about your PhD?
Absolutely. So in Cherokee culture, we have something we call gadugi. And unfortunately, that gets translated roughly as working together or community, but it incorporates more than just we're a part of each other. It even goes beyond the idea that we actually need each other to survive. There's an old saying, a lone Indian is a dead Indian, because we recognize that this idea of independence, none of us are actually independent. We just fool ourselves into thinking we are. I need sneakers. Somebody's got to make those sneakers. I'm dependent on the person who makes the sneakers. I need to eat. I can't farm my own food. I'm dependent on the farmer who cultivates the crops, who's dependent on the person who imports the oil that powers his vehicles. We really are interdependent. But recognizing that interdependence is kind of the core idea behind Gadugi, the idea that Creator made us to need each other. And not only do we need to say, oh yeah, we need each other, but we need to actually dig in deeper and find out how we need each other and why we need each other and what value each individual is bringing to the community as a whole that the community could not exist without. So one of the things I'm doing in my research is I'm looking at traditional Cherokee stories that have been passed down for generations and how those highlight that idea of Gadugi. One of them I'm working with right now is called Rabbit's Song. And I am not a traditional storyteller, so you can go online and find some of our traditional storytellers actually telling this story the way it was meant to be told. But my bad synopsis of this, the Council of the Animals has been meeting, but they're having a problem with Rabbit, with Chistu. Rabbit's the trickster character in Cherokee lore. Unfortunately, when Christian missionaries came, they assumed that Native American trickster characters were roughly the equivalent of Satan, which caused its own problems because most Native American cultures did not have that level of deception or tricksterism built into our lore. But Rabbit, if you watch his interactions, particularly in this story, demonstrates characteristics of somebody who is maybe dealing with some developmental challenges. He comes into the council and Rabbit wants to talk about rabbits and how wonderful rabbits are and how great rabbits are and how the world would not be good without rabbits in it. And to such a degree that Rabbit's obsession with rabbits is actually preventing the council from doing the council's work. So the decision is made, we're just going to eject Rabbit from the council because Rabbit is fixated on something that seems to us to be a very prideful thing. And we don't need him. We'll get business done. We'll keep him outside. So Bullfrog is sent to tell Rabbit, sorry, you're not being admitted. And Rabbit's outside and it's a sunny day and it's beautiful and Rabbit has his drum with him and Rabbit starts beating on it and dancing around and he's making all this noise and it's still disrupting the council. So Eagle says, Bear, I need you to go out there and I need you to make Rabbit stop. So Bear goes out, and Bear takes the drum away from Rabbit. He goes back in, and Rabbit's, I don't have a drum, but I can clap my paws. And so Rabbit's out there screaming and dancing around and clapping his paws, and nobody in the council house can hear what anybody else is saying. So Eagle sends another animal out to go help. And so the animal, what he does is he pops Rabbit's arms off. He says, you can have these back when the council meeting is over. And he takes Rabbit's arms back into the council house. Rabbit doesn't have any arms, so Rabbit just starts stomping his feet, and he's dancing and he's singing. Eagle sends another animal out to take care of it, pops Rabbit's legs off. Rabbit's sitting there, he can't move, singing at the top of his lungs. Finally sends somebody out, pops Rabbit's head off. Surely this will stop the noise. And what they hear is the song continues. And they all go out, and Eagle looks at Rabbit's body, and he says, Rabbit's heart is singing. Creator has given Rabbit this song for the rest of us. And so they put all of Rabbit's appendages back on, and they give Rabbit back his drum. And they say, teach us this song from Creator. And that's Gadoogie right there. It's the idea that everybody has something to contribute, and if we don't understand their contribution, it's because we haven't learned to listen. The systems we live in have taught us that it's okay not to listen. But that's not Creator's plan, and we see that in Scripture. You know, Paul talks about we're all members of the body. We're all needed. Every one of us is necessary. And so that's kind of where I'm going with my research is let's look at where this tribal culture has actually preserved Creator's heart for us. And what would that look like if we took people we saw as disruptive in the church and we said, wait a minute, what is it Creator has given you to share with us that none of the rest of us can hear?
Yes. Oh my gosh. And that is... so I'll say, like, this is the first episode where I've cried. But wow, I mean, and if that isn't the way that God intended it to be, to say, okay, I mean, even when you were talking about trouble, good trouble. It's the trouble you're supposed to get into. It's the things that we're supposed to. Nowhere does it say, just show up and put a 20 in the offering plate and.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. But that is it's Rabbit's heart.
Yeah.
Oh my. Uh-huh. Wow.
I'm hoping when I write the dissertation to conclude it with some practical examples of learning to listen for Creator's heart, for Creator's gifting in other people. One of the beautiful challenges that Creator gave me right after I started working on this was putting me in the company of someone who, like Rabbit, had their topic and they perseverated about it. And there were times when I'd sit down and I'd go, oh, we're going to talk about this again. And I would hear Creator say to me, now I want you to listen for my voice. Mm. I would sit there and I would listen. Okay, what are you saying to me through this person that I'm going to miss hearing from anybody else? And I had some of the most beautiful moments. And it was neat watching how that impacted that particular individual too, to have somebody who wasn't telling them repeatedly, as others had, please just drop it. Just shut up and don't say anymore. We're tired of hearing about it. Because that person had a message from Creator to share. They just needed me to figure out how to listen.
Imagine how our world would change if we could learn to do that. I mean, even with small numbers of people to go, okay, they're not a disruptor. I don't even know what would be a better word, but wow, of what it is that they have to teach us. Yeah.
This person is here because Creator's trying to get our attention.
Yeah.
Not because they're trying to inhibit us from doing God's will.
And how much we miss because we think that it all has to be and look a certain way. It has to sound a certain way. It has to, yeah.
I know any number of pastors who have because of their own disabilities, their own mental health challenges, have struggled with this. At one point, someone said to me, "You've clearly been given gifts for preaching and teaching. I have no idea how you're going to use them because you're so broken." And for me, that was a really hard moment. And I thought, well, my option here is to assume either God made a mistake in giving me these gifts, or that there's something in the church that needs to be reevaluated and re-examined. And for me, that was important because I'd grown up with your Cherokee, be proud of it, don't talk about it. And then in seminary, I started realizing that the differences I detected between myself and others when I was young didn't have to do with my being Christian and other people not sharing my faith. They had to do with the fact that my mother had unintentionally raised me with a Cherokee worldview, and I didn't see it through Western eyes. And so as I began asking, okay, well, God's given me these gifts. Now, what do I do with them? I started delving deeper into that Cherokee heritage and that tradition. And that's where I began to find real hope. And I thought, this is interesting because this is something that gets kind of sidelined as, we've got that noble savage image that's left over from early colonialism. And no, actually, here's something where Indigenous peoples really have something to contribute to the understanding of the Western world and how we interpret the Christian faith. I was talking to one old Cherokee a while back, and I said, it's really interesting that I think that we have within our tribal customs and history, our way of being means to help heal the people who came and hurt us. And his response was essentially, that is Gadoogie. Somebody hurt us, but we have something that can help heal the thing that led them to be hurtful to begin with.
Are you putting this into a book? Is that?
I'm hoping to. So what I'm doing initially for my thesis is I'm looking at 5 to 7 stories and doing essentially a critical reading of them, like we did with Hebrew and Greek in seminary.
Yeah.
And then assessing them. So that'll be straight up academic, but I'd eventually like to take this and make it into something that's popularly accessible, where any pastor or lay person can pick it up and go, oh, yep, that makes sense. And I now know where to go with this. I know how to implement this or how to think more deeply about it.
I mean, I'm just imagining Rabbit's song as a I don't even want to call it a sermon, because that's a message. That's something deeper than just a sermon. That's like a life. That's digging in, and wow. Yeah. Please do. Please put it in a book, because I'll buy it. And you can come back and talk about it on here, and we'll promote it. That's okie dokie with me, because wow, that is it. It's not like it's mind blowing, but also I think I love that it's simple, it's practical, it's all those things. It's not just so heady that you can't wrap your brain around it. I think is what I like the most, where you can go, okay, so this is Gadoogie, and this is, oh, okay.
Well, that's the beautiful thing about the gospel, right? It's simple enough for a child to understand it. And I think we want to feel that we are special and we are unique to such a degree that we often overcomplicate. What was really very simple in the beginning. Love God, love your neighbor.
Thank you.
As the rabbis have said, the rest is commentary.
Yeah. Yeah. What else do we need to know about you? Can I just say, like, the whole blacksmithing?
Yes.
Like, because yeah, a blacksmith.
So I started watching blacksmithing videos in seminary, just as a way to kind of clear my brain between classes. And after about 7 years of watching blacksmithing videos, I finally said, why haven't you actually tried this? So I was serving up in New York, and I found a blacksmith school not far away. And I said, well, I'm going to go take this one-day herb chopper class and just see if I even like it. And it turned out I liked it a lot. And so the smith who taught the class started selling me shop time. And then we went from selling to trading skills. So he'd let me do some stuff in his shop, and in exchange, I'd help him work through how he was going to teach a class or make suggestions for corrections of a project or how to better advertise his business. And so we had a real bartering system going actually by the end. And so now I'm down here in Virginia, and I've actually set up a little smithy in my backyard. Haven't fired up my forge yet, but it's out there and ready to go as soon as we've got enough snow off the ground for me to comfortably do so. And
awesome.
I joke, as I also took up karate in New York, and I said, so basically all of my outside of ministry hobbies involve hitting things.
I mean, sometimes you got to do something with all the, yeah.
That's it, exactly.
You know,
What I really love about the blacksmithing, though, is so I do have some mental health challenges of my own, and the blacksmithing, the white noise of the forge and that steady rhythm from the hammer, it's one of the very few things that actually just shuts my brain completely down.
Wow.
And I can completely lose track of time, and I can be at it for hours and not think about what's going on in the news, not think about what's going on in my congregation, just be there. And it's been beautiful the number of times just being there, and then I've come out of the forge, and then I've heard Creator speak to me in some sort of beautiful way, and it's like I just needed my mind clear enough and still enough to hear.
Maybe that's what I need to do, something where I can hit something and to clear the noise, because that's a difficult thing to do.
Well, it's beautiful because not only does it get the energy out, but there's something beautiful that's created through it. And I think that's one of the challenges sometimes when we get angry is we need to get the energy out, but we need to find creative ways, things that actually use that energy to create beauty rather than destruction. I think that's the difference between righteous and unrighteous anger. Unrighteous anger creates destruction. Righteous anger creates beauty. It was righteous anger that created the beauty of the cross.
Somebody should write that down. I mean, seriously, and if you all need sermon material, folks, like it's right here. It's right here.
This is all community. So yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Please, folks. Wow. I mean, you're just like a beautiful human being. I just want to say that, like, completely. And I'm so grateful for you, for your ministry, for your story, for your just living out loud, which I think sometimes people are so afraid to do. I have to ask you the joy question.
Yeah,
that one. So you got all of these things. You can answer this question however you want. What brings you joy?
So I spent some time thinking about what would be the most profound answer I could give to this.
Yes.
And decided instead to share that I raise guppies. And right now, the joy is the number of teeny tiny baby guppies that have just been born into my aquarium. And
how many?
I think I've got 5 of them right now that are doing quite well. I've got about 10 adults, and then a couple other fish in there to kind of keep things, some shrimp and things. But guppies don't eat their young. And so if you just allow everybody to swim freely, the ones that are strong survive just like in the wild. And it's neat watching, because I do not breed a specific variety of guppy. I go into the fish shop and I go, that one's pretty, I think I'll take it home with me. So I've got a whole bunch of different guppies, and the babies, I get so excited. It's like waiting for Christmas, waiting to see them grow up and see what their color patterns are going to be and which characteristics. Can you tell which two guppies mated to create this little baby guppy? So yeah, my guppies right now are bringing me a great deal of joy.
I didn't see that one coming, but that's the great thing about this. That's the great thing about this question. People answer this question in so many different ways, but I love that. Guppies.
It's a reminder that life goes on, and that creation has its own rhythms, and that even the things that seem big to us, the universe has been around for millennia. And the beauty creator put in it at the beginning, it's still here. We just have to look for it. And
your cats don't like try and go fishing?
No. Well, baby Eli does sometimes. He's started to take an interest in trying to get the lid off the tanks. But for the most part, I'll walk into the room, and I have 3 cats. I have Greta, who's my oldest. I have Crackle Cat, who I got to keep Greta company. She spent the entire pandemic sitting on my lap, and when I started going back to the office, she was like, "You don't love me anymore," so I bought her a cat. And then I have baby Eli, who's the youngest at a little over a year old. Most of the time I'll walk in and one of them will just be sitting staring at an aquarium. I currently have 2. I have the guppy tank, and then I have a couple of angelfish I'm keeping. And then I have a dream actually of starting a saltwater aquarium in my office, and maybe fragging corals in it. So we'll see how that works.
I've no doubt that you'll accomplish it, because it seems like, you listen for the creator's voice and go and do that thing, which is so very beautiful, so very beautiful. So for those listening, those watching, I will put in the show notes again Reverend Anna's link to her church. So, if you want to watch a sermon on Sunday, and all of the wonderful things that she has sent me. Oh my gosh, I'm just so glad that you did this. I just really, really appreciate you and this ministry of yours. Wow.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's been a real honor to be on your show and to get to share a little bit about what God's putting on my heart right now.
Yeah, and when you get that Ph.D. done and you've got that book written, you come back and talk about the book, and we'll share the book because I love that stuff. I love that.
You got it.
Connections. It's all about connections for me. So thank you. We thank our listeners, our viewers, for spending a little time with us, and we'll see you all next time.